Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's conference with the STS-133 crew. We'll start with opening remarks and then take questions. We'll begin with the introduction of Commander Steve Lindsay. Steve was born in Arcadia, California, and considers Temple City his hometown. He holds degrees from the U.S. Air Force Academy and Air Force Institute of Technology. He's also a retired colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Steve was selected as an astronaut candidate in 1995. Now a veteran of 4 space flights, Steve has acquired more than 1,200 hours in space. He served as the pilot on STS-87 and STS-95 and as commander for STS-104 and STS-121. We'll now turn it over to Steve to introduce his crew.
Thanks, Nicole. Let's see, just a real brief introduction of my crew. As mentioned, I'm the commander. This will be my 5th flight and actually my 3rd flight aboard Discovery. We've had a great training flow. We're all ready to go, all trained. Just a couple of more things. We'll go into quarantine on Monday, and we're ready for our launch hopefully on November 1st if everything goes well. So real briefly, my crew, a pilot sitting next to me, Eric Bowe. This will be Eric's 2nd flight. He previously flown as pilot on the space shuttle. He'll be doing robotics on the shuttle. He's basically performing all the piloting tasks on the orbiter. Specifically, he'll be doing the undocking and fly around, and he'll fly some of the entry as we come into land. In addition to doing transfer and a whole bunch of other things on the flight. Next, Eric is Al Drew. He's our MS-1. He'll be flying on the flight deck for ascent, and he'll be on the mid-deck for entry. Al's our one of our spacewalkers, so he'll be doing 2 spacewalks during the mission. Additionally, he'll be flying the robotic arm with Eric and myself using the shuttle robotic arm for inspection tasks and all the other shuttle robotic arms operations that are planned for the flight. And this will be Al's 2nd flight as well on the shuttle. Next to Al, Tim Kopra is our MS-2. He's our flight engineer on the flight deck for ascent and entry. He's also our EV-1, or our lead spacewalker for the flight, performing 2 EVAs. In addition, Tim will be flying the space station robotic arm during a number of our different operations while we're docked to space station. Tim previously flew on space station in a long duration mission. Next to Tim, I've got Mike Barrett. And Mike is also on his 2nd space flight, having previously flown a 6-month mission on the space station. And this will actually be Mike's 1st shuttle mission. He flew up and down on the Soyuz as flight engineer, or essentially the pilot position. So he has a lot of experience with that, in addition to doing spacewalks in Russian spacesuits. On this flight, Mike will be our mid-deck captain for both ascent and entry, running post-insertion deorbit prep. He'll be flying the space station arm during a number of the operations while we're docked, as well as during both of the spacewalks. And he'll be doing a lot of transfer work and actually doing some maintenance and repair work on board the space station while he's there. Finally, last but not least, Nicole Stott. She'll be flying on the mid-deck for ascent and on the flight deck for entry. Nicole's previously experienced with a long-duration space flight aboard the space station. Nicole's been doing a lot of the space station robotic arm operations. Additionally, probably her biggest job during docked ops is she'll be directing or running the spacewalks from inside the orbiter as the IV crew member. And so I've got a great crew. I've got a lot of talent. I've got a lot of experience on this crew. Something unique that we have is 3 veteran space station astronauts. So they'll be up there to keep us out of trouble while we're on board space station. So we have a great mission plan. Talked to the onboard crew this morning, just tagging up, doing some last-minute details. They're ready for us, and with a few more preparatory things to go. And so we're looking forward to having a great mission up there. And so with that, I guess we're ready to take questions.
All right. Thank you, Steve. We're going to start on this side. If you can state your name and affiliation, and we can start with Mark or Robert.
Oh, thank you, Mark Carreau, representing Aviation Week. I wonder, perhaps Steve Lindsay, or you can pick someone, but speaking a little philosophically about Discovery and the kind of condition you'd like to bring her back in. As I understand it, this orbiter is a candidate for display in the Smithsonian, or the Air and Space Museum, sorry. And just like to know what your thoughts are about returning it and what happens to it after your flight.
Well, we were actually down at Kennedy Space Center last week doing the terminal countdown demonstration test, the dry count, and talked to the folks down at KSC. And it's interesting because I've always viewed the vehicles as belonging to Kennedy Space Center, and they kind of loan them to us for a couple of weeks. And our job is to take care of them as best we can. And I always promise to bring the vehicle back at least as clean as we got it, which is pretty much impossible to do because they're pristine. I'm always amazed walking into these vehicles, Discovery being, 25 years old, and you still walk in and it's like a new car. And so we're going to deliver it back, hopefully in the best condition possible, and take the best care that we can with it. And it's going to be a great vehicle. Historically, it's obviously a very historical vehicle, having flown all the return-to-flight test missions after both the Challenger and Columbia accidents. It deployed Hubble. It's the fleet leader in terms of number of flights. It'll have flown about a year on orbit by the time we're done with it, which is pretty remarkable for a space shuttle. Personally, having flown it twice and now on my third flight, it has a special meaning to me. So my thoughts on when it comes back and when it's done with its service life, they haven't made decisions on where these vehicles are going yet, but I think we all have a pretty good suspicion on where this one's going. But I just hope that when it's displayed, I would like to see it displayed in such a way that people that go and see it for the many years to come can get an appreciation for what it was like to fly it. From our perspective, what it was like in the cockpit, what it was really like to operate, an appreciation for all the missions it did and all the versatility that the shuttle has offered. And in the end, though, when it really comes down to it, people are going to see the vehicles, but for those of us that have participated in the Space Shuttle program, it's really more about the people. When I think of Space Shuttle program, I think people, I don't think vehicles. And I think that's probably for all of us the biggest memory that we'll have out of this is the opportunity to work with a fantastic team all across the country over many years of this program.
All right, next question, Robert.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. Sort of work off that question and the answer. What does it mean to each of you personally to be on a final flight for an orbiter? Does it carry an additional significance? Is there an added symbolism beyond the goals that you have set out for the mission itself?
I've already talked. What do you guys?
I think overall, I think all of us are happy to be on another flight, get to go fly again. And for us, obviously, it's always nice. It's a little bittersweet, obviously, when something's coming to an end. But it's a privilege to get to fly the vehicle. And Steve said it very well. It's really about the people. We have Discovery, but there's thousands of people that make up keeping that vehicle flying and making it look the way it does and fly the way it does. So for me, that's really what makes this a great privilege to get the opportunity to go do this.
Anybody else want to answer that?
Well, I'm going to chime in on that one too. I think, and it's a continuation of what these guys have said. It's that, it is a historic thing. I think that, that we have such a special vehicle to fly, and the hope, in addition to having a successful mission, is that, in conclusion, we'll be celebrating just the real significance of the vehicle itself, and that includes the people, because it wouldn't happen without them. And I think that we have to look at this as a celebration of just how wonderful Discovery has performed, and just how fantastic the team that has put it together, worked to make it happen.
All right.
Bill Horowitz, CBS. Well, I'll ask Nicole this question, or Mike or Tim could also add. As Commander said, you guys are veterans of long-duration flights on board the station, and I'm wondering, what does that really bring to the table, or does it bring anything? I mean, when you get down to it.
We know where the bathroom is.
No, seriously, what does past experience on the station help you guys with on a mission like this?
Well, I think, just to start, I think, and the fact that I think everybody here is an experienced flyer just kind of puts, maybe a kind of a boost to the level of efficiency we'll start out with. The three of us certainly are, I guess you could say, intimately involved or intimately knowledgeable of the layout of the station and how to get around and where things are, and kind of the day-to-day operations that go on normally up there. But, as a crew, I think we just will be in a position to just operate a little bit more efficiently right as we cross the hatch.
Yeah, if I could jump in a little bit on that. Seen it from the other side, been up on station a couple of times, and when you get up there and you're with a group of folks that have been on station for a long period of time, in terms of just moving around the vehicle, They go through a series of adaptations when you get into zero G, and when your first flight, when you first get up there, you're just bouncing all over the place because you don't understand how little force is really required to move around. You get better and better, but you never really achieve a high level proficiency on a short duration flight. If you watch a space station crew member move around on orbit, their ability to get things done in a very efficient and effective manner far exceeds what we can do. And you really notice it when you're working next to somebody that's been up on space station for a few months, that they can do things so much faster and so much better than you can. So I think they bring that to the table. All of the things that kind of the bread and butter of what we do in day-to-day operations, when we have to do different photography things, when hooking up electrical components, working the computers on space station, which are similar to shuttle but different. They work different, and the systems are different. Having all that knowledge built into the crew. I've never actually been on a crew where we had space station experienced folks. So I think, but with all of that, they can answer all the questions that we're not sure about, and so I think it brings a lot. I mean, we'll see how it goes, but I think it brings an awful lot.
Like how to work the bathroom. No, I'm kidding.
That's actually very important, and they do know how to work it, and so yeah.
One more quick one from me for Tim Morrell. I was confused in the EVA briefing about where you guys are when you're venting aluminum, when you're venting ammonia. You're up, I guess, right by the pump module on the front side. I
That's
didn't know
correct.
where Tim was. I just wanted to know where you guys were.
So if things go per the timeline, I'll be crawling over the top of lab and heading towards Columbus. So I'm going to be well clear. In fact, ideally, if we had to synchronize in another way, I could be in a position to take photographs of the venting. But by the time I get to my location, I think the venting is going to be complete.
Thanks.
Sure.
Jill Tolk with the Bay Area Houston Magazine. A similar question to Bill's first question for the past station crew members. Things are going to be a little bit different. Obviously, you're not going to have the marathon equivalent of a space flight. You have a sprint because you're on shuttle, and this time you will have cupola. So you will have a bit of fun challenge, a difference. It'll be a different flight. So what thoughts and feelings do you have about that, where you'll be able to have a bit of a different flight, this time a different experience?
I'll take that to start with. We often use those analogies, marathon versus sprint. I want to remind people that a marathon, you're still running. And 6 months of running, you get more efficient at it, and you actually cover more ground at the end of a day after, say, 3 months up there than you would at the very, very start of your race. I was surprised how little free time we had on our station mission. After 6.5 months, we were still working very long days. So I wouldn't call a station mission leisurely in any way, shape, or form. I think for all of us, we're looking forward to a larger station, and you mentioned the cupola. And certainly most people would agree that the best use of any downtime you do get, which is very little, is to be looking out the window. And even that, you're typically using a camera and trying to take pictures of geological sites of interest. But I think most of us can't wait to see the cupola. For Tim and Nicole and I, we'll be doing a lot of the robotic ops with the station arm, and that is currently the robotic workstation place du jour. So we're very much looking forward to doing business out of there and relying a little bit less on our camera views and a little bit more on direct line of sight.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News for Eric. Eric, what are you looking forward on this mission? It's your second mission. I mean, like they said, no one's a rookie anymore, or not a rookie, but not. You're all experienced. But what's going to be the highlight of this mission for you?
Well, the highlight for the mission for me is actually, the first time you're up there, things go pretty quick. I'm sure it's going to go fast this time as well, but I think I'll have a little bit more time to look around and kind of pay attention to the small details to really, soak in all the things that are happening at the same time. Just like the last flight, I'm going to enjoy just, again, working with the control teams. It's a big team effort to get the job done. So to me, that's always a fun part. And obviously, getting the opportunity, Mike had mentioned it, looking out at the cupola, look out the windows and see the view out there. But I think the biggest overall thing that I hope to get out of this is just to really absorb some of the smaller details that I may have missed on the first flight and see new things.
Eric Berger with the Houston Chronicle. Question for Steve, or maybe Tim, Mike, or Nicole, people who've been to the station before for some time. When y'all leave, you're going to be seeing the station in its final configuration with the last module attached to it. So maybe one of you could talk about sort of seeing the station at different points in its evolution, then getting to see it in its final form as you fly away and really sort of be the first crew to do that from an external viewpoint.
I can give you one impression I had as I left on STS-128, and having spent a long time like the rest of my crewmates, especially the ones that were in our astronaut class waiting to fly, you go to program meetings, you work with hardware vendors, and you work at Johnson Space and other NASA centers to build this space station, and to be able to see it all working together, this really like a flying city in space is almost overwhelming. And for all the hard work and sometimes conflict and consternation, it's really great to see this beautiful piece of hardware that's flying in space. And so I'm looking forward to seeing it with a few more components and like Mike had talked about from the inside, being able to see outside the cupola.
All right, great.
Hi, Greg Dobbs with HDNet Television. Steve, your first answer to the first question was that you always try to bring a vehicle home in the same condition in which you left. It may be a weird question, but if somebody didn't think that way, didn't operate that way, what is it that could be done to a vehicle so it wouldn't come back as good? What is it you're going to do to make sure it does?
Oh, well, gosh, a whole bunch of things. I mean, first and foremost, we, in every activity we do on the shuttle and every procedure we do, we have procedures that we follow and ways of doing business, and we want to make sure we always stay doing those things correctly. In terms of the vehicle itself, housekeeping, believe it or not, is a really big deal when you're living, it's like living in a Winnebago for 14 days, and you want to keep it clean, and so housekeeping is a really important part. So we try to take really good care of it, try not to do anything with it we shouldn't be doing, and make sure we follow the procedures. And it's what I just said is what every crew thinks the same way, is they just want to bring it back as good as possible. In the past, it's always because we're going to turn the vehicle and we're going to use it again. This is a little unique because it's the last time we're going to learn use the vehicle. But if we were to land and all of a sudden the whole world were to change, they were going to get ready to fly it again. For some reason, it would be ready to fly again, and so that would be our objective in bringing it down.
All right, over on this side.
Philip Sloss with NASASpaceflight.com. I'm not sure who this is for exactly, but your mission has changed from when it was when you were originally assigned. This was going to be an 8+1 day mission, no EVAs, and now you've had 2 EVAs added and 3 flight days. Could you talk about the changes that have occurred during the training flow and kind of what's happened with that?
Sure. We started out, we were going to be the final flight in the Space Shuttle program, and the objective of that final flight, to make it really simple, so somebody like me can understand, was basically leave Space Station in the best possible configuration, which means get the maximum amount of upmass to station, the supplies they need, because it'd be the last shuttle flight, and leave it in the best condition possible. So you're going to go up, drop off our stuff, and undock as soon as we could, so that we didn't use any of their resources. Since then, we are no longer the last flight. The flight before us had some payload changes, so they moved behind us, and now, at least in the authorization bill, they've added that additional flight. So our objectives have changed. By the way, going into this as an 8-day mission, I never thought we'd ever stay an 8-day mission. I always thought we would pick up a spacewalk or two, because things change, things break. We have different objectives. So the program's added in a couple of spacewalks to do some cleanup objectives, some things, what we call homeless tasks, EVA tasks that need to get done but didn't have another place. So we added those in, returning a payload. Then recently, when the space station had the pump module failure and they had to do the replacement, we're doing some cleanup actions, going to vent that, move it back into place, and get ready so that they can bring it home, hopefully on a subsequent mission. So we're picking up all those tasks. It's been a challenge because we added those tasks fairly late in our EVAs. The content changed very, very late, but we were kind of prepared for that. We had some pool runs kind of held in reserve that we knew we were going to do, probably get new objectives. Tim and Tim and Al did a really good job training. I think they focused on more of a skills-based approach early on so that they could go and pick up those additional tasks. For example, they looked at tasks, they thought, well, this may come on our flight, even though it's not. And so I think they were well prepared when those changes occurred. So we've had a lot of robotics change, a lot of EVA changes, but I think we've adapted to it pretty well and trained to it. So that's part of the business. You need to be able to react to changes. You need to be able to react to failures, just like the space station does and just like they did recently. And so it's kind of how we've changed our approach over the years to be able to handle this anyway. So.
Hi, Mark Kirkman, Interspace News. First question for Steve. I understand you had, I think, your final entry sim this morning. I was just wondering if you might be able to give kind of an insider's look at the horrors you faced this morning and what some of the remaining training requirements you have between now and heading to the Cape, and then a follow-up for Ben.
Insight on the training that's left?
Yeah, what major events you have.
Oh.
And also what you faced this morning, what it was like to be in
Oh, well, we did our, to start off, we did our last entry simulator this morning. We did about 4 runs. We do various runs, but these 4, we all started from 200,000 feet, so kind of about Mach 17, 18, 19, somewhere around there. And you know, they throw various failures at us: computer failures, reaction control system failures, electrical failures. You know, and it just forces us to work as a team with us in the ground to go through those. And all those runs went great. And then the very last run was probably the most important run. We took it down all the way to the ground, and then we did what's called post-landing. After we land the shuttle, we go through about an hour of reconfiguration of the vehicle, working with mission control to get the vehicle safed and configured so that we can actually exit the vehicle. We actually went through all of those procedures to practice those one more time. As far as remaining training left, we have some photo, TV type training to go, some review of some systems and computer systems and a few other things. We have some medical tomorrow, our Launch Minus 10-day physicals and a few other things like that. We'll go into quarantine on Monday, and we'll do a few more review classes. We have 1 Ascent sim left with our Ascent team. And then after that, we'll fly down to the Cape, and we'll be ready to go. So there's very little training left. Mostly it's a lot of administrative things. We're trying to, personally prepare for going into quarantine and leaving our families for, 3+ weeks at least. So that's kind of where we are now. So we're well ready to go.
And then if I may, a question for BIM. I actually think I remember you as a cadet in CAP, and I was just wondering if you can maybe comment on what an organization like that how it might influence someone to be able to do great things. Not that looking at you back then, I thought you were a future shuttle pilot, but somewhere there might be one in CAP today.
So you're asking about CAP, which is Civil Air Patrol for everyone else that's out there, and it's an auxiliary of the Air Force. And they have a cadet program and obviously a senior program, and I was involved in the cadet program very heavily. I'm still a member, but what I enjoyed about as a cadet, for me, I was very interested in aviation. So there's an opportunity they gave me the opportunity to obtain my solo license, gave me all the flights and the training necessary to go do that. I was from Georgia. We did a lot of search and rescue. And so it was a lot of these things, a lot of the teamwork, a lot of the flying and aviation skills, and also just my passion for aviation kind of got fostered in Civil Air Patrol. So to me, it was a great program as a kid to get involved with and learn a lot of different things about that. That answer your question?
Okay. Jim Oberg with NBC. A quick question to make sure that, have you all found time to vote?
Oh, yes. We're all early voting. So actually, I voted yesterday morning. It was a short line, so it's probably going to get longer.
And a more serious question about last things is that we know the flight crews always encourage the ground support groups, the teams, their trainers, operators. And you're always deeply involved in encouraging these people. You're facing a double challenge now that many of the people you're working with now probably won't be here 6 or 12 months from now. What kind of special things are you doing to encourage people who are, without any fault of their own, approaching the end of their NASA careers? How are you helping them keep up their spirits?
That sounds like a difficult question. I guess I'll try to answer that. Yeah, it is a difficult. We were down at Kennedy Space Center last week, and it was about a week or so, maybe a week and a half after they took 1,000+ layoffs. We took 300 and something here, I think, and more to come. And it's a very difficult time. The thing we noticed with all the people we're working with, all the teams we're working with, is even with those layoffs, everybody's very motivated to see this program through and see it through successfully. Eric and I were actually talking about this yesterday a little bit, that it's really interesting that you're, you come here and you realize after you've been here for just a short time that the workforce here and the other centers is very special, because these people aren't here because they're getting paid more than you would in any other organization. Matter of fact, probably particularly in Houston, for an engineer, you're getting paid less to work here. But people are doing this because they love it. So to watch program winding down and watch people losing their jobs is tough, but they're all very motivated to do the right thing. So from our part, what we do is we do our best to continue encouraging those folks, thanking those folks for what they do, participating in their events wherever we can, whenever we can, and trying to encourage them. And one thing that I've told several groups that reaching the end, I said, it's true for us too, because when the shuttle programs goes away, we won't be a part of it either, and our own office is shrinking as well to go with it. So it's kind of sort of happening to all organizations. But the one thing that I like to tell folks is that you're part of a very special team, one that you probably won't ever see again. I mean, there may be a team for the new vehicle, whatever that is, and it'll be a good team, but it won't be this team. And if nothing else, you can look back, I think, with a lot of pride on what we've done over the years with the Space Shuttle program and building the space station and the Mir and all the satellites we did before that, and all the things we did with the Space Shuttle. And so we like I said, we do our best to encourage people. Now, that doesn't give them a paycheck, and there's not much we can do about that, but try to encourage folks and help folks where we can is about all we can do. So.
I believe we have someone.
Haley Kappas with the Galveston County Daily News. Al, can you tell me what it's like or what your thoughts are going into your first spacewalk, and kind of give a picture of what training has been like for that?
Just feeling very lucky right now. Like Steve mentioned initially, that our flight didn't have any spacewalks scheduled when we first started. Tim and I were scheduled for contingency spacewalks, but we're never sure that we're going to have one. So when the opportunity arose to pick up some of these homeless tasks along with the cleanup from the pump module failure, it was a great opportunity to go out and help out the program, and of course go outside and look at the universe from outside of a vehicle for a bit. Having said that, I think a bigger part is feeling like you can make a big contribution to the program itself. There are things out there that we can do. We've got special training to go do, and it's going to keep the space station alive longer. We're trying to extend it beyond its original intended lifespan, and to hopefully look back in 2020 and see it out there working, and think I had a small part in keeping it going that long, I think will be the big part I'll take back from this.
Carrie Feibel, Houston Public Radio, and also on behalf of Austin Public Radio. Mr. Copra, I wanted to, as someone who's from Austin, I think a lot of Texans are going to be keeping a special eye on you. And I wanted to find out from you a little more what your feelings are about being one of the last few people to be on a shuttle mission. And also, what would you say to students who, during this time of transition in all the programs, who still want to be an astronaut, who still might want to be an aerospace engineer? What would you tell them?
Sure. Well, I think like all my crewmates here, we all feel very privileged to be part of this mission. And we also feel like we have a lot of responsibility to do the best that we can to put space station in the best possible condition before we leave. So we're both very privileged, but also, we feel the responsibility to do the right thing and work hard and do a good job for everything that's planned on the mission. In terms of what young people think in terms of their aspirations to do big things like be an astronaut or some other large goal, I would say that the primary thing that any young person needs to think about is their big goal and working towards that. And in large measure, it's not so much the goal, because I feel very fortunate, like all the folks in our office, to have this job. But I think one thing I've learned along the way is the path is as important, if not more important, than the goal itself. So anytime young people work hard in academics or their extracurricular activities and they excel, I think it just increases their possibilities in the future, and they should just continue to work hard and dream big.
Okay, with that, I think we'll switch over to Kennedy Space Center, where we have a few reporters as well.
Yes, hi, Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. We just heard from the Robonaut briefer that he spent 20 years going around asking people what they would do with a robot if they had one. So my question for the three former space station residents is, if you had had a robot aboard the space station with you, what would you have had him or her or it do? And how do you see Robonaut as easing the burden for future crews?
Well, hi, Marcia. That's a really good question. And I think we see Robonaut, as the program does, as very much a technology demonstrator. It's the first time we've had a humanoid-shaped robot for spaceflight, and that conjures up all sorts of uses and things well beyond what we've got envisioned for it quite yet. So I think that's the important thing, is that this is a very much first step. And we will be identifying some breadboard tasks over the next few years to figure out how best to use a humanoid robot in space. When you look at some of the tasks that we're asked to do and what a robot could do, you're thinking of things that would be perhaps dangerous for a human to do, or repetitive tasks that would wear a human out. So if you were to go around the station, for instance, and identify scenarios where it was risky to send a human in, whether you had a suspected fire or a toxic release, and what you needed was a switch throw or to discharge a fire extinguisher into the right fire port, that's the kind of thing we could eventually envision sending Robonaut in to do. A couple of those scenarios, I'd much rather send a robot in than go in myself on a gas mask. But again, we're very early, and we'll be mapping those tasks to the capabilities that Robonaut demonstrates over the years. And it will be years before we figure all this out. So we're excited to see this all start.
Thank you. And if you had to have unloaded one of the more unpleasant, mundane tasks while you were up there for months, what would that have been?
Nothing that Robonaut, nothing that Robonaut has the dexterity for at this point. I can put it that way.
It's funny, though, up there, nothing seems really
I think I get your picture. And I have a question for Colonel Drew. I'm just wondering if being an astronaut was something you've aspired to throughout your Air Force career, whether it was there with you from boyhood, and how you've gotten to this place in time now, today.
I didn't really aspire to become an astronaut until I was at least 5.5 years old. By that time, I gave up my dream of being a pilot and decided to go pursue that. I was watching the Apollo program back then and thought that was something that looked like it was more like fun than work. I've since learned otherwise. It's still fun, but it's still a lot of work. It was one of the things that was in the back of my mind during my Air Force career, but nothing I really took that seriously. I think betting your career on becoming an astronaut is like planning your pension around winning a lottery. It's something you can go pursue, but you sure have a plan B in place. So I did everything to make it to stack the deck in my favor, but never really expected it was going to happen.
Hi, it's James Dane from Florida Today. And similar to Marcia's question about Robonaut 2, I wanted to ask the same for those of you who've had experience on station about how the addition of the PMM might have been welcome, just adding that closet, as it's being called, or extra storage space.
I think it's going to be a really outstanding addition to the station. I think anybody that's lived and worked up there has, at one time or another, or many times, felt like, wow, if we just had a closet where we could stick this, or we just had, designated storage for these particular items, it would be such a great thing. And I think what it's going to do is it's going to provide that, but it's also going to give us the opportunity to go through station and look at where we have stuff and maybe better distribute so that we make even more space available. So I think it's going to be a really, really nice addition.
Thanks, Nicole. If I could stick with you for a moment, we've been trying to occasionally follow Discovery's processing flow as it's getting ready for a final flight. As someone who's intimately familiar with that process, just wondered if you could speak a little bit to what it takes to, and you guys have talked about the thousands of people involved, what it takes to turn around a vehicle for flight, and to the extent you've been able to follow it closely, if there's anything unique that you've seen during Discovery's flow.
Well, I think as it goes for any vehicle down there, it's a complex thing, and you move from the runway back to the orbiter processing facility with the orbiter itself, and then in parallel with that, you've got all this work that's going on in preparing the boosters and the external tank, and then ultimately bringing it all together. But I think we always have to go back to the people on this, because when I worked there and now when I get the chance to go back, it is so impressive to me to see how just cleanly it all does come together, for as complex as it is. And you can take just one little part that's in the aft part of the orbiter and look at the complexity of that and see how nicely it comes together, and then look at these, these 4 big pieces, the shuttle and the 2 boosters and the tank sitting so beautifully together at the end and ready to launch. And it's really an interesting process, and it all comes down to the people that are there that know how to do it and have, like these guys have said, a real passion for making it happen. And as far as anything unique and what's gone on, I don't know that there really is anything this time to point out. I think for us, it's just always a real pleasure to go down there and see the milestones, the kind of the steps that are being taken to make the vehicle ready for launch. And when we were down there last week for TCDT, or for our practice count, it's another one of those impressive times where you stand at the base of that pad and you look up at this beautiful vehicle, and you just give a big thanks to the people and are just really happy to know that you're going to be strapping in there in a couple weeks and getting to launch. So I hope that answers your question.
That's great. Thanks so much. And there's just a couple of final questions for Commander Lindsay. I recognizing there may be an additional shuttle flight added, but knowing that there's only 2 remaining now, I just wondered if, was it in fact kind of a relief to you as the leader of the mission when this mission became no longer the last shuttle flight, in terms of just knowing all the added attention and stress that might add to getting ready for a flight, and now another crew is going to have to deal with that?
Gosh, I never really thought of it as a burden. Honestly, my feelings on where we flew where we are in the manifest is, we were originally selected to be the last crew for the last flight. When it moved, it's never been about us. It's always been about the program, what's right for the space station, what's right for the space shuttle program. So when we moved out of that position, we're happy to serve wherever we can best serve the programs and get the objectives done. So it wasn't, whether it was the last flight or not the last flight, I didn't really feel, honestly, when we were the last flight, I didn't feel any additional pressure associated with that. Maybe I should have, but I really didn't. So it's kind of a wash for us, I think. But we're happy to be flying together. We're happy with our objectives, looking forward to the mission. And so personally, I'm really excited to be flying with this crew. I love all these guys and girls, and they're a fantastic group of people to fly with. Somebody once told me when I first came into the office, you'll find as you get more experience, it's less about what you do on a mission and it's more about who you get to fly it with, and I think that's really true in this case.
Great. And you mentioned earlier that the astronaut corps, like other parts of the program, the agency, is shrinking a bit as the program nears an end. Being a former head of the office, can you tell us what the Corps is going to look like after shuttle flyout is complete in terms of numbers and how you move forward?
Well, I can tell you what we do to size the office. The office has always been sized based on the manifest requirements. In other words, who we need to fly when, how often we need to fly. So we were always sized for, shuttle and station, and then when station went to 6 crew, we needed a bigger crew to support that. And then, so we planned the sizing to support the manifest, plus a pad to deal with, somebody who maybe doesn't get trained all the way in a certain system, like spacewalking or robotics, and we also plan to deal with unexpected medical conditions. And so that's how we sized the office. We did size the office for shuttle ending and space station at 6-person crew, and then the addition of the Constellation program when that was and so we planned our sizing for that. So I think the sizing in the future really depends on what the program looks like, not the ISS program, but the follow-on next vehicle program. And so I know that right now that they're looking at the sizing, and they'll calculate what size office we need based on those manifest requirements. So it's a constantly somewhat changing target. We will hire early to try to prepare for that. We don't always get it right because if the program doesn't fly exactly on time, then we may have too many. If we come up to speed earlier and we don't hire soon enough, then we may not have enough. And so we try our best to plan for that and hire according to that so that we have the right numbers of folks to accomplish the mission. So I can't give you a specific number because I've been doing that for the last year, and I'm sure probably the current division office and flight crew ops can probably elaborate a little bit better on where they are. But that's essentially the process that we use to decide the size of the office.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for either Steve or anybody who wants to take it. I was curious about what you folks thought about the commercial crew transportation program, shifting the responsibility for launching astronauts from NASA to the private sector.
Anybody want to take that? I guess not. No? Okay. Another hard question. I get to take that one. Well, I think it's a challenging time in terms of what we're doing with that, and haven't been working on it the last year because I've been training for this mission. To go from essentially government oversight to government insight, it'll be an interesting transition we have to go through and a real challenge for us because we have to figure out what you want the commercial companies to succeed, and you want them to be able to do it hopefully cheaper than what we do it, how we do it, and that's one of the motivators for doing it. But the challenge is making sure we maintain the safety. So I guess when I put on my old astronaut office chief hat, what I look at is I think the devil's in the details here, and it's all on how we implement it. How much insight is the right amount versus oversight. And so I think from an office perspective, what we'd be looking at with that transition to commercial is first and foremost the safety of the process, the safety of the vehicle that we fly, making sure that it meets our human rating requirements. And so I think the way we're approaching this is in terms of how we handle the human rating requirements to this new set of contractors, if you will, that will be providing this new vehicle to us. So I don't know if I answered your question very well, but it's very much a work in progress, and I think the key is how we do it. So I don't think anybody's against doing it. It's just a matter of how you implement it, and implement it smartly, safely, and effectively.
If I could give a big picture spin on that as well. We're kind of fixated right now on the next steps that we're about to take. But as an office, I think you'll find down to the last person in our office, we're all very pro-NASA, but more broadly, we're very pro-human spaceflight. And I think if you look at the long run, most of us would agree that the more human spaceflight, the better. And whatever means out there help us to accomplish that, because there's so many reasons for us to get off and explore and expand, then we're in support of that, no question about it. So if this becomes one of the logical next step, again, from a big picture standpoint, then we're going to be very supportive of it. And we're going to offer as much help as we can individually.
Thanks very much. Let me give Steve an easier one. I was wondering if you guys have nicknames for each other, and if you do, what they are and why.
Not as far as you know. No, I don't think I can say anything here that wouldn't get me in trouble. So I think I won't.
It wasn't as easy as you thought.
Yeah.
That was the easy one too. Let me try one more, and this is for Steve. You mentioned that you've flown Discovery twice, and this will be your third flight. I'm wondering if the vehicle has a personality of its own, and if it does, how you would describe it.
Oh, that's a good question. I think they do. I've flown Columbia, Atlantis, and Discovery, and it's probably just imaginary, but I think they fly differently. And to be specific, I think Discovery. Well, Columbia flew different than either of the other two, and I think you can explain that because it was a lot heavier. It had tiles all over it as opposed to thermal blankets, and I think all of the handling qualities of Columbia were just a little bit different than the other ones. It flew like it was heavier, quite frankly, from what I remember. I think, interestingly enough, I think Discovery has a little bit wilder ride on ascent It just reminds me that the motions that you feel as you're going up, I mean, the trajectory is the same, it looks the same, it flies to the same cutoff conditions, but it just seems to be a little bit wilder, a little bit wilder ride on ascent. I think Atlantis is a little bit rougher ride on entry, specifically in Atlantis. When you hit, typically in all the vehicles, when you hit the Mach 1 point, you get this buzzing that goes through the airframe as you slow from supersonic to subsonic. And you notice it on Discovery, but it's not very much, and it doesn't seem to be very long. At least the last time, a couple times I flew it, it was like that. Atlantis, it has this buzzing that, at least on that flight, went on forever. And it may have been associated with the weight of the vehicle or the center of gravity of the vehicle, but to me, they fly a little bit different. So I think the personalities are a little bit different, how they feel, how they fly. They all fly great, they all handle great, but they're just slightly different. So you can tell. There's some switches that are different, but very, very small deltas there. But they just handle a little bit different to me. So I guess that's how I describe the differences.
All right, with that, we will now switch over to headquarters where we have a reporter with questions.
Hi, this is Denise Chow from Space.com. One of the other milestones that will happen if your mission goes on with the proper timeline is that the 10th anniversary of Expedition 1 arriving at the space station, and especially for the members of the crew that have spent significant amounts of time on the station. I was just wondering what that milestone means to you and for the future of the ISS.
I guess I'll start out. You know, it's really interesting being able to fly on a shuttle mission after being on station. And you know, all of us have watched from the very beginning when space station crews first started, and actually the rigor that they went through for their training, and what they had to experience when they're on board. And I guess one thing that I noticed over that time is that both the quality of life in training and quality of life on board space station has continued to improve. And that's a great thing. I think we're learning how to live in space, and every step and every crew is doing it better and getting smarter, and the program is getting smarter. You guys have anything?
I think one thing is to say thank you to them because I think from the very beginning, starting with this, you know, significantly smaller volume where you had these three guys living up there and working as an international crew, working on, you know, a vehicle that had even at that size had been built from that point on successful international program. It just was such a great starting point for all of us who now get to experience this ginormous volume and still sharing in this really spectacular international program that has made it such a success.
And just a follow-up question for Steve. I thought it was really interesting how you were talking about the differences of the various shuttles that you've flown on. And I was just wondering about Discovery in particular, if you've noticed differences between the first and the second flight that you've taken, and to your knowledge, the upgrades that have been made for this upcoming mission, if it'll feel different for you.
I don't think it'll feel different. The first flight on Discovery was not to space station, and we actually had a Space Hab additional science module in the back of the payload bay, so it was a lot heavier, and the mission was a lot different. It was a lot shorter. Second mission, we went to space station, and we were a little bit lighter, and we had the power transfer, or we didn't have the power transfer system yet. We will in this flight. But in terms of how they flew and how they operated and acted, basically the same. What was unique, the first flight I flew Discovery, we went really high. We went up to Hubble altitudes. We were up at about 360 miles high, and in a different orbit than space station. And the view of the Earth from that different orbit is just altogether different than what it looks like off a space station. And so that's probably, if you want to compare those two flights, for me, the different altitude really made a huge significant difference in how the Earth looks. At the altitudes we were flying, the Earth looked a lot smaller and a lot rounder, which you wouldn't think a difference of, gosh, what was it, maybe 120, 130 miles makes, but it really makes a big difference when you're up there.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you for everyone joining us. That concludes our briefing. For more information on the STS-133 mission, we encourage you to look at our website, www.nasa.gov/shuttle. Thank you.